All right, today we're going to go over group setting management. So we're going to review kind of the hierarchy of how global works, how the tenant level works, and a little bit into exception management. So this is going to be the ongoing management of Sention when you need to make changes after activation. All right, let's dive into it. So the first thing I want to explain is going to be global management. So global management is where you're going to want to have the highest level of control. This allows you to link a tenant level baseline, a tenant level group to a global image so that you can have a single global image managing hundreds, thousands of baselines across hundreds and thousands of tenants. So you can do that in a single screen here. And I'll show how those connect in a little bit. But this is going to be the best way to do it. Some best practices you will find as you mature with the Sention platform that many of your clients will surprisingly have the same, if not the same, but very similar baselines as each other. So some naming best practices, despite some of the random names we have listed here, might be user with Defender active, user without Defender, right? So you'll have some variations of different global baselines that you'll assign to the various tenants. And you can very easily see which of those baselines are actually inheriting value. So I'll go ahead and show that really quick. So we can see edit attached baselines. And we can see the 9 baselines that are actually linked to these devices come from these tenants, and the associated endpoints are going to be right here. Now, the important thing to notice about this screen is we can also see which settings are not the same at the global versus tenant level. So these are unsynchronized, so that these policies, there's 2 policies at this baseline that are not the same or not what the global baseline wants. So this gives you a very quick view as to the differences at the tenant baseline level of the same baselines linked to the same global. I can very easily say, those 2 shouldn't be different. I'm actually going to put those back to the global image. And you can see now that 2 went to a 0. If we needed to add additional baselines to this image, we can very easily hit add baseline, choose whichever one we want, and then we can add that in. So you'll now see that the Barks one is now associated, and that association, we didn't resync it automatically. We are now asking you, hey, give it a quick review. These are the differences. And if you so determine it, go ahead and resync those. That way we can get them all standardized. Standardization is going to be your goal. That's the key word here. Okay, so that's a little bit about the global management. And as you see, the tenant level can override the global unless you choose to resync it. Cool. So let's say you need to make a change at the global level. So we'll use that same CIS 100, and we're going to hit edit global baseline this time. So you can see here all of our modifications. We can do the same check marking. We can do effectively the same action you've seen in other screens. So you can see that here. We can modify it directly, whichever we want that to be. And we can add our annotations and save. Right? So you can do the same functionality, view your drafted changes, and then you can apply, right? If you so choose. So that's an example of global baseline. As a reminder, we do need to make our global baselines for Chrome, for Edge, any add-ons, whichever you'd like. So that's the global level. Let's dive into the tenant level. So I'll go into our Sention developers where we've been, and we're likely going to see a quick warning at the top. So if you notice this banner at the top, there's going to be some baselines in here that are not up to date with the new settings that we have either added to our support or new settings that have been deprecated per the CIS or guidance of the application or OS, right? So some of these may have updates, and we'll review updates in a later video, but you would just click here and go through that process. I will go ahead and proceed with our objective here, and I will review, we'll call tier 1. We'll do some edits here. So I'm going to go ahead and click this drop arrow. We can edit, add endpoints, create exception, or manage those global on all from here. I'll go ahead and click see info so we can see the actual management screen. And you can see we have a ton of exception groups here. And you can see here we have very similar choices, a couple extra, but we can go ahead and make management choices here. So if I wanted to just simply make a new tenant level change, I would hit edit. And I will go ahead and demonstrate this. We'll again just unmanage these first two policies. And now you can see we made that change. It is going to say it's unaligned with global, which is perfectly fine. This is what we wanted. I'll also scroll down to the exception group. Exception groups are effectively going to be the exact same as what is above, except for the policies listed in this area. So these are going to show the differences between the two parent and child relationship. If you have since decided, say, hey, you know what, the account lockout, I actually am ready to harden those policies to the parent image. I no longer need the exception groups. You just check mark those and hit remove from the exception group. And now that will remove those policies from this exception, and the endpoints associated with the exception group will inherit the value of the parent group. Okay? So that's kind of how exception management works. And again, we have the view drafted changes, and we can see those changes that took place. Okay? And I'll go ahead and actually show one more thing. We can also move endpoints. So if I were to click this move button, you can see I can select the machine and I can move the machine to a different exception group if I so choose. So if I do all of that, I can hit move, and now you can see I have the drafted changes as well with the new machine that was previously part of the main baseline, now into a different exception group. Okay. I'm not going to apply those changes, but that is a review on that. And just like you can remove, you can also add. Tell you what, for the recording, why don't I go through that as well? So let's say there's an exception that you additionally need that is not already an exception. You can go through the add exception. So I have now hit add, and I can scroll on up. You can see this is the exception group, which is already a very large exception group. But let's say I need to add an additional exception. So we'll go ahead and just choose the Google Time Service and select. And now you can see we are going to modify this. This is the exception. We're going to modify the value, and we're going to change that to not configured and save. So now you can see we are going to have the additional modification of the Google Time Service set to default. And now when I view drafted changes, we will also see settings added. So you've now understood the parent modification, which was up here, the exception group modification, which we've removed, we added a machine and we added a policy, and then all we would need to do is hit apply. Again, I'm not going to do that because there's no value in actually doing that. So I will leave and not save my changes. So I'll go back into that baseline and we can go ahead and review some of the other functionality. So I'll just go back into CInfo rather, and we'll review a little bit about that baseline actions button right here. And we can see we can also delete exceptions if we so choose. We already talked about, well, we talked about adding an setting to an exception, but you can create a new exception group, delete the baseline entirely, and other choices. These are pretty self-explanatory. If you want to delete, you simply click delete and you can delete whichever exception, and add, you can imagine, is a similar process like we went through. The last choice here is manage global add-on. So this machine, or rather this baseline, does have Chrome hardening associated. If we wanted to remove that, we can very easily remove, and we can always add other ones. When you're adding a global baseline, you always need to choose which one you need, and then simple update is going to be best practice. And then you can move on. But cool. That is going to be an explanation on setting management, and all those changes do take place right away. All right. I will talk to you in the next video.